So in the previous video I outlined the general area of suspense accounts, and I want to develop that a little bit further to illustrate how we as accountants need to deal with scenarios where a suspense account has arisen. So just to recap from the previous video, you saw that a suspense account in a trial balance represents a fudge. It's a value of a ledger that is inserted in order to make the trial balance. So if that €7,000 in the screen wasn't included in the trial balance would not balance. And of course, trial balances must balance. It's the nature of the accounting process that requires that they balance. So to sort of summarize this, it's a ledger account. So what is a suspense account? A ledger account used for either two main purposes. First off, for temporarily holding items for which some doubts arise. So the kind of scenario that may happen there is you receive cash in the post, okay, can happen, but I'm not sure whether it's from a customer. So it could be a customer who sent cash to repay you, in which case it would affect the customer's account, or it could be a loan from a friend of the owner or from the owner himself or herself, or it could be rental income. You don't know. You simply don't know how to deal with the cash. So you have to record the cash, but you don't know whether to put it into the receipts from customers a column, or the loan column, or the rental income column. So what you can do is put it into the suspense item until you find out later what the cash refers to. So that's one scenario where a suspense can arise. And that's a relatively easy one to ultimately address, because when you find out the information, you can simply put the amount of cash into the appropriate column. So it'll go into the cash receipts day book, maybe into the receipts from customers account, or somewhere like that. The more challenging scenario is where a ledger account is used simply to make the totals of a trial balance match when errors have occurred. So when you do out your trial balance, you remember this from the previous semester, the trial balance doesn't balance, unfortunately, and you've got yourself a problem to address. So you temporarily create a suspense account with the value of the trial balance difference, and what you then have to do is figure out how to correct what errors occurred. So we need to go through this process, and this is where this module topic will be going. We need to identify the reasons for the suspense balance. So what happened in our accounting process that caused this suspense account balance to be necessary, and then of course we have to adjust as required to get rid of the suspense. In other words, fix the errors that happened. And this is where students tend to start to get a little bit of fear in their hearts. This requires that you have a very, very good understanding of double entry accounting rules. Okay, and that is all about the debits and the credits. And if this is an area where you consider yourself to be needing assistance, this is something that you will need to work on for this particular module. So to give you a little bit of guidance here, I want to look at a little bit of revision from the previous semester, posting rules for the day books. Okay, so I'm just going to look at that, and in your handouts this should be an attachment to your slides. So this is material that was covered in the previous semester. You should all recall that when you filled out the various day books, so you filled data into the sales day book and the purchase day book, receipts and payments, and then you totaled up all the columns. So in the sales day book you totaled up the gross column, the VAT total column, the net sales column, and then these rules here were used to determine what to do with the various totals. So the gross total of the sales day book was debited to debtors control account, credit to VAT account, credit to sales account for the net, and so on and so forth. Now there's a whole lot of debits and credits there, and this is where errors can occur. You may recall that one of the triggers for the suspense is that you could have incorrect or incomplete double entry accounting. So this is the double entry accounting rules for each separate day book. So if you don't follow these exactly when you're doing your postings, you will have incorrect or incomplete double entry accounting. Now, looking at this large list of debit rules and credit rules, you may find that a bit sort of scary. You may find it a bit intimidating, or a bit daunting trying to remember all these rules, and you can imagine how easy it might be to get confused about what do I debit and what do I credit. So again, to kind of guide you a little bit here, I want to recall this notion of dead click. That's a mnemonic that I use to try assist in figuring out what to debit and what to credit. So DEAD, debit for expenses, assets and drawings. Now what I mean by that is, if I know that an expense item needs to be created, the accounting rule is that an expense item must have a debit balance. So I will need to debit the expense account. So if I need to, say, create an expense for rent, so I open up my ledger account for rent, my T account, and I'll put the amount of rent on the debit side. Okay, that creates an expense account, so debit for expenses. Similarly, if I buy a new asset, say I buy a new car, okay, a car is an asset. Car is an asset, and to create an asset or to increase the value of your assets, you must debit assets. So you would debit motor vehicles with the value that you paid for the car. And if I have drawings, if I'm a sole trader and I have drawings, so I pay myself maybe say €500 a week, each time I write a check for drawings, I will debit drawings. Now there has of course to be a corresponding credit, and generally those credits would be in the bank account or maybe creditor's account. Similarly for credits, CLIC, credit, liabilities, income and capital. So if I want to create a liability, or if I want to increase a liability, I must credit the liability account. Okay, CLIC, credit for liabilities. So say I receive an invoice from a supplier, okay, for €1,000, and I haven't yet paid it, so I owe it to the supplier. So I will credit the liability account, credit suppliers or credit creditors account. If I make a sale, that represents income, so I will credit the sales account. So extra income will need to go on the credit side. And if I introduce capital into my business, that will be credit to the capital account. Now these rules are being applied in each of these posting rules for each day book. Just to take the sales day book to illustrate how these rules apply. So the gross amount that you sell is owed to you by your supplier, by your customers. So customers are assets. Okay, so you want to increase what your debtors owe you. So debit debtors. Okay, debit assets, debit debtors. The VAT amount on sales, you owe that to the tax office. So it's a liability of your business to the tax office. So to create a liability, credit liabilities. So credit VAT, VAT being the liability. And the sales that you made, that's income of your business. Okay, so we need to credit income. Here we are crediting sales account. And the same general principle is applied to each day book. So what you will need to do is you really need to ensure that you understand your debits and credits, and particularly what you see here on the screen, it's often used to identify the correction needed in many suspense account questions. So whether it's a case of understanding, which of course is the preferable approach, or memorizing, which is certainly less than ideal, but if needs be, it's better than doing nothing, you need to ensure that these rules are thoroughly understood by you in advance of attempting questions on suspense accounts.